17 species had failed to open the tomb. Ruth Adler was not supposed to be the 18th. She sat on a flat rock 200 meters from the main dig site, running her scanner over mineral samples while the real scientists argued about quantum locks and temporal seals. 3 months on this dead gray world called Verith. 6. And Ruth had done nothing but catalog rocks. The Coalition Archaeological Survey had brought her as a geological consultant, which really meant she was cheap labor with a degree. The tomb rose from the barren plain like a wound in reality. Black stone that absorbed light. Doors that had not moved in 47,000 years. Every telepathic species had tried to communicate with it. Every technological civilization had attempted to crack its codes. Nothing worked. Ruth watched a group of Morvathi scientists approach the entrance again. They were tall beings with gray skin and 4 arms, and they moved with the confidence of people who had conquered 100 worlds. Their leader, Counselor Dravan, placed all 4 palms against the stone and closed his eyes. Purple light flickered around his hands. Nothing happened. Dravan stepped back and shook his head. Ruth could hear his voice carry across the dead air. The structure resists all known forms of mental contact. Perhaps it is simply broken. A small feathered creature beside him chirped rapidly. That was Urin, a Kithrani researcher who talked too fast when excited. But the energy readings suggest active systems inside. Something is waiting. Something was waiting, Dravan corrected. 47,000 years is a long time. Whatever lived here is dust now. Ruth looked back at her samples. Gray rock. More gray rock. A slightly different shade of gray rock. She missed Manitoba. She missed trees and lakes and stone that had stories she understood. Her break came an hour later. She walked without thinking, her feet carrying her toward the tomb simply because it was the only interesting thing on this world. The other workers avoided the structure, unsettled by its silence. Ruth felt no such fear. She had spent her whole life around stone. Her father had died in a mine collapse when she was 12. She had become a geologist to understand what took him. Stone was not her enemy. Stone was just stone. She reached the entrance and looked up. The doors stretched 30 meters high, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Ruth did not try to read them. She simply pressed her palm against the surface, feeling the mineral composition through her fingertips, cold, dense. A crystalline structure she did not recognize. Strange, she murmured to herself. What are you made of? The stone warmed. Ruth froze. The temperature under her hand rose slowly, like something waking from deep sleep. Cracks appeared around her fingers, spreading outward in patterns that looked almost like writing. Then came the voice that IT was not sound. It was vibration, traveling through the stone into her bones, up her arm, into her skull. It spoke in perfect English, with an accent that belonged to nowhere and everywhere. Ruth Elizabeth Adler. Her full name. Her complete name. A name she had not spoken aloud in years. The doors split apart. Ancient dust poured out like breath held for millennia. Ruth stumbled backward, her heart pounding, as the tomb opened for the first time since before her species had discovered fire. Behind her, she heard shouting. Running footsteps. Dravan's voice cutting through the chaos. What did you do? Human, what did you do? Ruth could not answer. She stared into the darkness beyond the doors, where something was beginning to move. A shape unfolded from a crystal coffin in the center of the chamber. It rose slowly, stone grinding against stone, and turned to face the light. That IT was beautiful. It was terrifying. That a figure made of living rock. Granite and quartz flowed like liquid across its form. Its eyes burned silver, ancient and patient. It stepped forward past the Morvathi guards who raised their weapons, past Counselor Dravan, who demanded explanations, past Urin, who had forgotten how to speak. IT stopped directly in front of Ruth. The voice came again, grinding mountains pressed into words. You speak to stone. Ruth's mouth was dry. I was just touching it. Yes. The figure made of rock almost smiled. That is what we have waited 47,000 years to see. A warm one who speaks to stone without knowing she speaks. You call yourself human. We called you the awaited. Dravan pushed forward. This is coalition territory. You will explain yourself. What technology opened these doors? What signals did the humans send? The guardian of living stone did not look at him. Her silver eyes remained fixed on Ruth. No technology, no signals, just a woman who talks to rocks because she finds them comforting. The guardian extended a hand made of flowing mineral. I am Lithel. I am the last of the Verathan. And you, Ruth Elizabeth Adler, are the only reason I did not let myself crumble to dust 10,000 years ago. Ruth stared at the impossible hand offered to her. Behind her, the galaxy's greatest scientist demanded answers. In front of her, something older than civilization waited for her response. She took the guardian's hand. The stone was warm, like sunlight on mountain rocks, like her father's calloused palms when she was small. Okay, Ruth said quietly. Tell me why you know my name. Lithel's silver eyes flickered with something that might have been relief. Because the stones of your birth world have been singing it for 34 years. And I have been listening. Lithel had not moved in 6,000 years. Now, she could not stop looking at the human woman who held her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. The coalition team surrounded them within minutes. Weapons pointed. Scanners hummed. Counselor Dravan shouted orders in 3 languages. None of it mattered to the guardian of Livingstone. She had waited 47,000 years for this moment. A few more minutes of chaos was nothing. You need to explain yourself, Draven demanded. His 4 arms were crossed, his gray face tight with frustration. How do you know this human? What is the meaning of this display? Lithel finally turned to look at him. Her neck moved like grinding glaciers. You ask small questions. I have large answers. Which do you prefer? Start with why the doors opened for her, and no one else. That answer is simple. Lithel released Ruth's hand gently and faced the gathered crowd. 30 scientists from 12 species watched her with fear and hunger. The Vera then built this tomb to open only for those who speak to stone. Not with telepathy, not with technology, with something else. Urine pushed forward, feathers rustling with excitement. What else is there? Those are the only 2 methods of communication we know. You know them because you evolved them. Your minds touch other minds. Your machines touch other machines. But humans, Lithel looked back at Ruth. Humans evolva differently. They form bonds with things that cannot bond back. They name their vehicles. They apologize to furniture they bump. They whisper to mountains and weep when old buildings fall. Ruth shifted uncomfortably. That is just being human. Everyone does that. No. Lithel's voice was soft. No one else does. In all the galaxy, in all the species we observed before our extinction, only humans love what cannot love them in return. You do not see this as strange because you have always done it. But to us, it was a miracle. Draven made a sound of disgust. You are telling me that your ancient civilization sealed its greatest tomb behind a lock that only opens for sentimentality? That is absurd. It is not sentimentality. It is the rarest gift in the universe. Lithel walked slowly toward the center of the chamber, where her crystal coffin still glowed faintly. Let me show you what we were. Then perhaps you will understand. She touched the coffin. Light exploded outward. Suddenly they were not in the tomb anymore. They stood in a vision of the past, watching a galaxy teeming with life. Ruth gasped as she saw the Verathan homeworld. Mountains that walked, rivers of liquid crystal, cities carved from living stone that sang in harmonies no throat could produce. We were the first. Lithel's voice echoed through the vision. Before your species learned to walk upright, we had mapped every corner of this galaxy. We heard the voice of stone across 10,000 worlds. We were eternal. The vision changed. Something dark crept at the edges of the galaxy. A shadow that consumed light. A silence that ate sound. Then the silence came. Ruth felt cold despite knowing this was only a memory. The darkness spread, swallowing stars. Wherever it touched, consciousness ended. Not death. Worse, absolute emptiness. We cannot fight them. No one can fight the silence. They are not alive in any way you understand. They simply erase. Lithel's form flickered with old grief. So we chose to delay them. We sacrificed ourselves to build a barrier. a song sung in stone across the galaxy. It would hold the silence back until help arrived. The vision faded. They stood in the tomb again. What help? Ruth asked quietly. You, Ulmans. Lithel faced her. We saw you in our final prophecies. A species that would one day love stone as we did, but with warm blood and warm hearts. A species that could reinforce our song and keep the barrier strong. We sealed this tomb and waited. 47,000 years. And now here you are. Urin was scribbling notes frantically. This is incredible. A galactic barrier. Ancient prophecies. We must study everything. Dravan stepped forward. Agreed. Guardian, you will share your technology with the Coalition. We will analyze your barrier and improve it with modern science. Lithel did not move. I did not wake to give you weapons. Then why did you wake? The Guardian's silver eyes dimmed. Ruth saw something in them that looked almost like fear. Ancient, tired fear that had been held alone for too long. I woke to give you a warning. Lithel's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. The song is failing. The barrier we built is cracking. The silence that we delayed for 47,000 years is pressing against the walls of reality once again. Silence. Real silence. The scientists stared. How long? Ruth asked. Years. Perhaps decades. Not centuries. Lithel reached out and touched Ruth's cheek with fingers of warm stone. You speak to stone without knowing you speak. But you must learn to sing. Your species must learn to reinforce what we built, or the silence will swallow everything that thinks and feels and dreams. Ruth's heart was pounding. I'm just a geologist. I do not know how to save the galaxy. I know. Lithel almost smiled. That is why I will teach you. Starting now. She turned to the tomb wall. Place your hand here. Feel what I feel. Ruth looked at the ancient stone. She thought of her father, buried under a mountain. She thought of all the rocks she had talked to over the years, never knowing anyone was listening. She placed her hand on the wall, and the stone screamed. Ruth collapsed the moment her palm touched the wall. Her body fell, but her mind flew outward, carried by something vast and impossible. She felt the planet, not as data on a scanner, not as numbers and compositions. She felt Verith, 6 like a living thing. Its molten core was a dying heartbeat. Its stone crust was skin stretched tight over ancient bones. And running through everything, like blood through veins, was pain. The planet was screaming. Ruth understood now. This was not metaphor. The Verithin had woven their barrier into the stone itself, and the stone remembered. It remembered the silence pressing against reality. It remembered the fear of oblivion. It remembered and it suffered. When Ruth opened her eyes, she was lying on the tomb floor. Lithel knelt beside her. Urin fanned her with his feathers. Even Dravan looked concerned. What did you do to her? Dravan demanded. I showed her the truth. Lithel helped Ruth sit up slowly. She can hear the stone now, as I hear it, as my people once heard it. Ruth's hands were shaking. It hurts. The whole planet hurts. Yes, it has hurt for 47,000 years. It will continue to hurt until the barrier is reinforced or until the silence consumes everything. The news spread quickly. Within days, the small archaeological camp had become a city. Ships arrived from across Coalition space. Politicians and generals and scientists poured onto Verith, 6, all wanting access to the Guardian and her secrets. Lithel refused to speak to any of them. She would only communicate through Ruth. When a human woman touched her stone form, thoughts passed between them without words. Ruth became the translator for conversations that decided the fate of civilizations. It was exhausting. Why me? Ruth asked one night, alone with Lithel in the deepest chamber of the tomb. There are billions of humans. Why did you need this specific human? I did not choose you specifically. The stone did. Lithel sat motionless, her form barely distinguishable from the walls around her. You talk to rocks. You have done it since you were a child. The stones of your world heard you, and they remembered. When you came to Verith, 6, the barrier stone recognized a voice it had been waiting to hear. But I cannot save the galaxy. I am nobody. All saviors are nobody until they save something. Lithel's silver eyes glowed softly. The Vera then were nobody once, just minerals that learned to think. Then we built a barrier that held back oblivion for longer than your species has existed. You do not need to be special, Ruth. You just need to be willing. Outside, Ruth could hear the arguments continuing. Dravan was meeting with military leaders from 6 species. They wanted to study the barrier, to replicate it, to turn it into a weapon they could control. They did not understand. Can you teach others to hear the stone? Ruth asked. Any human can learn. You all have the gift. But it takes time. Years of practice to hear clearly. Decades to sing strongly enough to reinforce the barrier. Lithel paused. We do not have decades. Then what do? Lithel was silent for a long moment. Ruth had learned to read the Guardian's moods through subtle changes in her stone form. The way her granite shifted. The way her quartz flickered. Right now, Lithel looked like someone carrying a weight too heavy to bear alone. There is another way, Lithel finally said. A faster way. But I cannot ask it of you. Tell me anyway. No, not yet. First you must understand what we face. First you must feel the full truth. Ruth stood and approached the Guardian. Then show me. Whatever it is, I need to know. Lithel rose slowly. She led Ruth deeper into the tomb, past chambers that had not seen light in millennia. The air grew thick. The stone around them grew warm. Finally, they reached a small room. In the center sat a pedestal. On the pedestal rested something that made Ruth's breath catch out a seed, or something like a seed. It was made of crystal and ore, swirled together in patterns that hurt to look at. It pulsed with faint light, like a heartbeat waiting to start. What is that? Ruth whispered. The last child of the Vera then. Never born, never woken. Lithel's voice cracked like splitting rock. We could not reproduce alone. We needed warmth. We needed someone to love us into existence. When the silence came, there was no time. So we preserved this one. The last of us, waiting for someone who could wake it. Ruth stared at the seed. It looked so small, so alone. You want me to wake it? I want you to understand what will be lost if the barrier fails. Not just living minds, not just civilizations, but potential, the child that never was, the futures that will never happen. Lithel's silver eyes met Ruth's. The silence does not just kill, it erases. It makes it so that things never were. Can you imagine a fate worse than that? Ruth could not. She reached out toward the seed, then stopped herself. Will waking this child fix the barrier? No, but it will require the same gift. The ability to love stone into life. Lithel placed her hand over Ruth's. This is what humans can do that no one else can. You give your hearts to things that cannot ask for them. You love without guarantee of return. That love, Ruth, that love is the only force in the universe that can stand against absolute emptiness. Somewhere above them, the politicians argued about weapons and power. Here in the dark, a woman from Manitoba looked at an unborn child made of crystal. Teach me, Ruth said. Whatever it takes. Teach me. Lithel nodded slowly. Then we begin now, and we pray that we have enough time. The screaming woke Ruth 3 nights later. She had grown used to hearing the stone, a constant whisper at the edge of her mind. But this was different. This was agony broadcast across an entire world. She ran from her tent toward the tomb, pushing past confused guards and startled scientists. Lithel stood at the entrance, her stone form trembling. It is happening, the Guardian said. The barrier weakened again. Another section failed. Where? A system called Kepler-7. 12 worlds. 40 billion lives. Lithel's voice was hollow. They're gone now. Erased. The silence touched them, and they simply stopped existing. Ruth felt sick. 40 billion people? Just like that. The silence does not kill slowly. It does not give warnings. It simply arrives, and then there is nothing. Lithel turned to face the crowd gathering behind Ruth. Do you still doubt? Do you still think I speak of ancient myths? Counselor Dravan pushed forward. You expect us to believe that billions of people vanished overnight? Our sensors would detect such an event. Your sensors cannot detect nothing. That is what the silence leaves behind. Nothing. Check your star charts. Look for Kepler-7. You will find empty space where 12 worlds used to be. Dravan pulled out his communicator. His gray face grew paler as he spoke to his ship in orbit. When he lowered the device, his 4 hands were shaking. The system is gone. Our records show it should exist, but there is nothing there. Not even debris. Panic spread through the camp like wildfire. Scientists who had dismissed Lithal as a curiosity now looked at her with terror. Military commanders demanded immediate evacuation. Politicians called for emergency sessions. Ruth stood in the chaos, feeling the stone beneath her feet crying out. Every rock on Verith, 6 had felt the barrier weaken. Every mineral in the planet's crust knew that oblivion was creeping closer. "We have to do something," she said. Lithal nodded. "Yes, we do." She raised her voice, and it carried like thunder. "Listen to me, all of you. The barrier is failing because it needs voices to sustain it. The Verithan are dead. Only their song remains, and it is fading. But humans can learn to sing as we did. Humans can reinforce what we built. How long will that take?" Dravan demanded. "Years. Decades. Then what good is it? You just said the barrier is failing now." Lithal looked at Ruth. Something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words. "There is another way," Ruth said quietly. "Is that not true, Lithal?" The Guardian closed her silver eyes. "Yes, there's a faster method. A single human could merge with the stone network, become a living conduit, broadcast the barrier across the entire galaxy at once." Hope flickered in Dravan's expression. "Then do it. Find a volunteer. It is not that simple." Lithal opened her eyes. The merging would change the human, transform them into something between flesh and stone. They would experience every world with barrier stone, every planet crying out, every crack in the wall that holds back the silence. "And after?" Ruth asked. "Would they still be human?" "I do not know. No one has ever tried. The Verithan could not do it. We were already stone. We needed a warm one." The camp went silent. Ruth looked around at the alien faces watching her. None of them stepped forward. Why would they? This was not their gift. This was not their burden that a ship descended through the gray sky. Ruth recognized human markings on its hull. When the doors opened, soldiers poured out, followed by a tall man with tired eyes. "Commander Hassel," he introduced himself, approaching Ruth. "Earth sent me. They are calling you an asset now. I am here to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Hassel glanced at the coalition forces surrounding them. "From anyone who thinks they can use you as a weapon, or a bargaining chip, or a laboratory specimen." He lowered his voice. "Earth needs you alive and free, Dr. Adler. Whatever happens next." Ruth almost laughed. A month ago, she was cataloging gray rocks for minimum wage. Now Earth considered her an asset worth protecting with soldiers. "Commander," she said, "how much did they tell you about the barrier?" "Enough to know is the only thing keeping some kind of cosmic horror from eating the galaxy. And they know about the merging? The way a human could reinforce it." Hassel nodded slowly. "They know. They also know what it might cost. Earth's official position is that no one should be forced to make that choice." Ruth turned back to Lithal. "What happens if I do not do it? If no human volunteers?" "Then we train as many humans as possible to hear the stone. We scatter them across the galaxy. We hope they can reinforce sections of the barrier before those sections fail." Lithal's voice was heavy. "Some will succeed. Many will not. Billions more will be erased before we make enough progress." 40 billion people had already vanished. Ruth thought about 12 worlds blinking out of existence. She thought about families and children and dreams all erased as if they had never been. She thought about the crystal seed in the deepest chamber. The Verithan child who had waited 47,000 years for someone to love it into existence. "I need to think," Ruth said. "Of course." Lithal placed a warm stone hand on her shoulder. "But Ruth, do not think too long. The silence does not wait for us to be ready." That night, Ruth sat alone outside the tomb. She placed her palm flat against the ground and listened to the stone weep. Her father had died under stone. Now stone was asking her to give up everything. She did not know if she was brave enough. She did not know if she had a choice. Urin found Ruth sitting in the deepest chamber, staring at the crystal seed. The little Kithrani approached slowly, his feathers flattened with concern. He sat beside her without speaking, which was unusual for him. Ruth appreciated the silence. "You're going to do it," Urine finally said. "Are you not?" "I do not know yet. You have been down here for 6 hours. You have not eaten. You are staring at an unborn rockchild like it holds all the answers." His feathers ruffled. "I think you know." Ruth laughed despite herself. "You are too smart for your own good. My species is known for it. Also for talking too much." He paused. "Why are you really down here?" "Not to decide. You have already decided." "So why?" She reached out toward the seed, but did not touch it. "I wanted to see what I might become. What humans might become if we learn to do this. A bridge between flesh and stone. A new kind of being." Urine tilted his head. "That scares you." "No, that is the strange part. It does not scare me at all." Ruth finally looked at him. "I have been talking to rocks my whole life. My father used to laugh at me for it. Said I care more about minerals than people. Maybe he was right. That is not a flaw. That is a gift. The galaxy does not need my gift. It needs a hero who can save billions of lives." Urine made a clicking sound with his beak. "You know what I have learned, working with coalition scientists for 20 years? Heroes are not born special. They are ordinary people who find themselves in extraordinary circumstances and choose to act. Your gift put you here. Your choice makes you a hero." Before Ruth could respond, alarms blared through the tomb. She jumped to her feet and ran toward the entrance, Urine close behind. Coalition soldiers filled the main chamber. Draven stood at their center, flanked by officials from 6 species. Commander Hassel faced them with his human guards, weapons raised. "What is happening?" Ruth demanded. Draven stepped forward. "We are taking the Guardian into protective custody. Her knowledge is too valuable to leave in the hands of one human. You cannot do that. She will not speak to anyone else. Then we will find ways to make her speak." Dravan's forearms gestured at his soldiers. "The coalition has decided. This is not a human matter. This concerns all species." Lithel emerged from the shadows. Her stone form moved slowly, ancient and tired. "You would dissect me? Study my corpse for secrets? That is your solution? It is pragmatic. It is foolish." Lithel's voice rumbled like an earthquake. "I cannot teach what I know to anyone but the one who speaks to stone. Kill me, and you lose your only chance." Dravan hesitated. Then his expression hardened. "We will take that risk. Seize the Guardian." Soldiers moved forward. Hassel's guards raised their weapons. For a moment, violence hung in the air like a blade. Ruth stepped between them. "Stop." Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "All of you stop. Dr. Adler, please move aside," Dravan said. "No. You want a solution? I will give you one." Ruth turned to face Lithel. "Tell them about the merging. Tell them what I can do." Lithel's silver eyes widened. "Ruth, tell them." The Guardian was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice filling the chamber. "A human can merge with the barrier stone, become a living conduit, reinforce the song across the entire galaxy in hours instead of decades." She paused. "But it will transform her. She will become something between human and Verithan. She may never be fully human again." Dravan's soldiers lowered their weapons. Even the counselor looked uncertain. "You would do this?" he asked Ruth. "Give up your humanity to save species that have dismissed your kind as primitives?" "I'm not doing it for you." Ruth looked at Hassel. "I'm not doing it for Earth either." "Then why?" Ruth turned toward the passage to the deep chamber, toward the crystal seed waiting in the darkness. "Because 47,000 years ago, the Verithan sacrificed everything to give the galaxy more time. They did not ask if we deserved it. They did not wait to see what we would become. They just loved us enough to die for us." She faced Lithel. "That is what humans do. We love things that cannot love us back. We hope even when hope makes no sense. We protect even when protection costs us everything." Lithel's stone face shifted. Something that might have been tears gathered at the corners of her silver eyes. "You understand," the Guardian whispered. "I understand that there is a child down there who has been waiting for someone to wake her up. I understand that the galaxy is full of children who will be erased if no one acts. I understand that I can complain about unfairness or I can do something about it." Ruth took a deep breath. "So, I am doing something about it." She walked toward Lithel and took the guardian stone hand. Teach me how to merge. Teach me how to sing. Lithel nodded slowly. Kulme. We go to the heart of the barrier. They walked together into the dark depths of the tomb. Behind them, soldiers and scientists and politicians stood in shocked silence. Urin was the first to speak. Well, he said quietly, I told you she was going to do it. No one argued with him. The heart of the barrier was not a machine. It was a chamber carved from the core of Varith 6, where pressure and heat had compressed stone into something almost alive. Ruth stood at its center, Lithel beside her. The walls glowed with mineral veins that pulsed like blood vessels. She could feel the entire planet around her now, could sense the tendrils of Varithan stonework stretching across the galaxy like a net trying to hold back the sea. Are you ready? Lithel asked. No. Ruth smiled weakly. But I'm not going to get more ready by waiting. You will feel everything. Every world we touched. Every crack in the barrier. Every whisper of the silence pressing against the walls. It may be overwhelming. What do I do? You do what humans have always done. Lithel placed both stone hands on Ruth's shoulders. You love. You sing. You refuse to let go. Ruth closed her eyes. She thought about her father, buried under a mountain in Manitoba. She thought about the 12-year-old girl who had pressed her ear to rocks and imagined she could hear them talking. She thought about 47,000 years of waiting and an unborn child made of crystal. She thought about love. Lithel began to hum. It was not sound exactly, more like vibration that traveled through the stone and into Ruth's bones. The walls joined in, harmonizing with frequencies that had not been sung since before humanity discovered fire. Ruth opened her mouth. She did not know the words. She did not need to. The song rose from somewhere deeper than thought, somewhere older than language. It was the song her heart had been singing her entire life without knowing it. She sank into the stone. Her body did not move, but her consciousness expanded outward like an explosion in reverse. She felt Varith, 6 first, its wounded crust and dying core. Then she felt the barrier threads stretching toward other systems. World after world opened to her awareness. 10,000 planets with Varithan stonework. 10,000 voices crying out in languages she somehow understood. They were in pain. They were failing. They were begging for help. Ruth sang louder. The barrier strengthened around her. Cracks sealed. Weakened sections solidified. She felt the silence pressing against the edges of reality, felt its hunger and its emptiness, and she pushed back with everything she had. Not with strength, not with technology, with love. She loved the stones that had buried her father. She loved the gray rocks of Varith, 6 that no one else found interesting. She loved the impossible child waiting to be born. She loved every pebble and boulder and mountain on 10,000 worlds. The silence recoiled. For a moment, Ruth felt it hesitate. It had never encountered anything like this before. It consumed consciousness. It erased thought. But love was not thought. Love was something deeper, something it could not touch. Ruth sang until she had no more voice. She loved until she had no more heart. And when she finally opened her eyes, she found herself standing in the chamber, still human, still Ruth, but changed. Her skin had threads of quartz running through it now, barely visible, like veins of light. Her eyes held flecks of silver. When she breathed, she felt the rhythm of stone. It worked, Lithel whispered. Her voice shook with emotions that stone should not feel. The barrier is restored. The silence is pushed back. Ruth looked at her hands. They were still flesh, still warm, but she could feel the entire galaxy now, a constant, gentle presence at the edge of her mind. What am I? She asked. You're the first speaker, the first bridge between warm life and living stone. Lithel smiled, and it was beautiful. You are what we hoped humans would become. Ruth turned toward the deepest chamber. The child. Can I wake her now? Yes. You have the gift. You have proven it. They walked together to where the crystal seed waited. Ruth knelt beside it and placed her hand on its warm surface. She did not need instructions. She knew what to do. She loved it. She loved the child who had never seen light. She loved the possibility sleeping inside crystal and ore. She loved fiercely and completely, the way humans love things that cannot love them back. The seed cracked. Light poured out, and from the breaking crystal emerged a small figure, barely a foot tall, made of rose quartz and copper. She opened eyes like dawn and looked up at Ruth. "Mother?" the child asked. Ruth felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes, little one, I am here." Lithel knelt beside them. Liquid silver ran from her eyes. 47,000 years, she whispered. "I have waited so long." The three of them sat together in the deep dark, old stone and new stone, and the woman who bridged them. Above, the galaxy continued spinning. The coalition would demand explanations. Earth would want answers. The work of teaching other humans to speak to stone had only begun, but that was tomorrow. Today, a child had been born. A barrier had been restored. A woman from Manitoba had become something new. Ruth held the crystal child close to her chest. She felt the warmth of Lithel beside her. She felt 10,000 worlds humming with life. "Will you teach others to hear?" the child asked. Ruth smiled. "Every human already knows how. They just forgot they were listening." Outside the tomb, the sun rose over Verith 6 for the first time in 47,000 years without fear. Inside the tomb, a new family began, and across the galaxy, the stones finally stopped screaming.